Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we're going to talk about modernizing Minnesota's government as well as Minnesota policy. Policy that when federal government fails us, our state government steps in and looks out for us, the average citizen. Now today there's clear focus on both in state and national government. Government has taken the position the better business does, the better our farmers do, the better public employees do, the better it is for common citizen. I think most of us would argue with that. And we look at the balance sheet of the common citizen compared to business, farmers, and our public employees. It means we need to see that our government in Minnesota especially, that we can control and have influence on, starts addressing the needs of common citizens and addresses the needs when our congressional delegation, led by Amy Klobuchar, failed to see that federal policies address our major concerns. And we're going to look about energy, where our state government should be modernized and should be called on the carpet to see when our congressional delegation and our federal government fail to look at the rising price of gasoline and the rising price of heating our homes and the costs it brings into the food system and everything we as common citizens use and do. We have to get on the people in St. Paul, our governor and our legislators, to modernize our government and start working on policies that affect us as common citizens. Now, I'm getting the privilege to talk to a new 125,000 households through Charter, and soon growing additionally on Charter and other cable outlets, as well as our some towers for people who don't have access to cable. And so with that, I want you to understand, our new audience to understand, what Inform TV is. Inform TV, our goal, and on a one-man show run by Alan Repke, controlled by Alan Repke, is to enlighten you, as our logo shows, as the sun, and energize you to do something. Because the common person that I work with here in Alexandria on weekends to support my TV habit, I find that they have adopted the policy. They can't do anything about it. They certainly can, and we can do a lot more, and we cannot let Election Day be the only time we speak. We have to modernize our government so our government is responsible to us, not just business and the special interest groups and the conveners of special interests, which you can see at our website, informtv.com, and look at what Roger Moe and some of the people in the past have developed our government into serving special interests. But I don't want you to lose listening to what we have to talk about today. In fact, rather than giving my view right away on what we need to do to modernize government, I want to talk about crude oil prices. Now, with gas prices going up and the talk of gasoline prices being from $4 to $5, even $6 by summer when you plan on taking your vacation, I want to show you what Inform TV, why we're different, and why you want to go to informtv.com and look at some of our previous programs that were on community TV in outstate Minnesota, but now we're going commercial where we can do some advertising, so I don't have to work nights to fund my TV habit. Then I can bring you unique information because I have advertisers that you, my viewers, can help me get by asking your car dealer, your favorite restaurant, the companies that you buy from. We want to see what this guy's got to tell us. And I can only do that if you work with me to see that I have advertisers. Today we're going to talk about crude oil. Now, from a standpoint of Minnesotans, you say, well, what is this guy talking about? We can't do anything about crude oil. We pump basically zero crude oil out of the state of Minnesota. But the marketplace has changed dramatically. It's changed, one, why? because ethanol is a major production product, and I'm very pro-ethanol as a 10% blend in gasoline, and that's mandated here now. But we, our governor and our legislators, have seemed to have lost sight when our congressional delegation has failed us and to get the Keystone Pipeline in the ground to see that we get that Bakken oil down to Cushing, Oklahoma, and to Joliet, Illinois, so the refineries around the country, especially refineries in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, start bringing us product, give us that energy independence. But our congressional delegation, the people that are supporting Obama's plan that, hey, let's just do conservation and wind power and all these things, it's a bunch of baloney. But our Minnesota legislature and our governor, we're going to show you today, can do a lot to lower the price of gasoline and home heating oil in Minnesota by tapping the crude supply that's available to us in Minnesota and our neighboring state, North Dakota, and our friends in Canada. Here's what I want you to look at that no one else is talking about, and if our TV networks or your local newspaper conglomerate picks it up, get some credit for Alan Repke on this, because they're not talking about this in any manner, shape, or form. What is the cheapest place, one of the cheapest places to buy crude oil in the United States? Clearbrook, Minnesota, in northwestern Minnesota. It's a crude oil pipeline up there. And the research that I do at Inform TV shows an incredible disparity. I first saw it on the Energy Information line where they were talking about crude oil, and I tried to find that particular site in that massive site where crude oil was about $28 a barrel cheaper in the Bakkens than it was in Cushing, Cushing, Oklahoma. Now, as I continue my research for you, my listeners, I find out that on this day, Thursday, the 15th of March, we have crude oil in Clearbrook, Minnesota, priced there for the marketplace at $87 a barrel. Anywhere from $18 to $20 a barrel cheaper than Oklahoma price. So why aren't we here in Minnesota with a huge supply of ethanol as well as cheap crude oil in Clearbrook, Minnesota, tapping that? Well, one of the reasons we're not tapping is we've got a congressional delegation that's not doing their job to see that that Keystone Pipeline is put in the ground. If you go to informtv.com, you'll see that not only should we be allowing that pipeline to go across Nebraska, whether it's the Sandhills or the eastern side, either one are fine, either one are safe. And you can go to the local Scenic station here, pull up the freeway. I've still got that piece of 36-inch pipe. You can see how incredibly strong it is and how incredibly safe it is at the Scenic station in Alexandria. Just pull off 94 and go towards downtown Alexandria. You'll see the Scenic station there. You'll see the pipeline in there, how safe it is and how big it is. Yet our congressional delegation is not seeing that that's going in the ground with this early spring. But anyway, I want to show you here that on this Thursday, the price of crude oil is only $87 a barrel in Clearbrook, Minnesota. Yet we're paying gasoline prices that are similar to what we find around the country. And in fact, when I look at this chart that Bloomberg has, you can see just the other day in March it was $80 a barrel, and in fact we can look at this chart in February where the price of crude oil in Clearbrook, Minnesota was only $71 a barrel. So the question comes up, if we're going to see that our government in St. Paul, our governor, our legislators start looking out for us, why aren't we bringing our own pipeline along some of the pipelines that are already bringing product to Minneapolis or pumping refined product out of Minneapolis market? Why aren't we seeing that our legislature, rather than just worrying about the Minnesota Vikings, the billionaires, are actually looking out for us, and we want Minnesota jobs? When the unions are talking about jobs, I'm for them. I want to see jobs, but I want to see jobs that benefit all of us, not just billionaires and millionaire players and a few restaurants downtown. Yet I want to keep the Vikings there, and you can see my view on the Vikings at informtv.com as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But here, people, what we're finding is when our congressional delegation has failed us, our state government should be running a pipeline into the Balkans and into a situation where we can tap into that crude oil from Canada as well, and see that those refineries in Minneapolis are serving the state of Minnesota with the cheapest crude oil possible. That we're not just laying back like policy has become and said, the cheapest product is just let business do what they want to do. The numbers are clear in the last decade or so that business is just looking out for business. And I'll give you another example of this. Here we have cheap crude oil in North Dakota, and even at a buying point at Clearbrook, Minnesota, in a pipeline. Yet our governor and our legislator are not taking care of that. So I want you to energize yourself and call those people and show them Inform TV. And why aren't we having a public hearing where a person like myself can come before a committee and start putting some sound policies, some modernizing policies to see that we get product. Now, the other interesting thing, we hear from these liberals that want to talk about how this pipeline will endanger the environment. We've got about 150,000 miles of pipeline. We've been using pipeline for decades safely. And yes, they can spill, they can crack, but look at that pipeline I have, a piece of pipeline at the Senex station here in Alexandria, and you see they are addressing those issues. Yet at the same time, because we're not putting in that pipeline, what is happening? The crude volume coming out of the Balkans and coming out of Canada is oozing. In fact, we get a surplus of product in Oklahoma because of that. And what are they doing? We're trucking crude oil and we're railing crude oil, clearly polluting the air far more than an electric pumping system in a pipeline, and a pipeline system is way cheaper to move it. Yet we see when we have a state government that's not modernized, that is not looking out for the needs of common citizens. What is old Warren Buffett, who owns the Burlington Northern, doing now? It shows at the Alpha site I'm looking at here, shows that they started running unit trains out of the Dickinson area, 100-some car loads of crude oil in rail cars. And what did they do? Did they focus on bringing that to Minneapolis to lower the prices of gasoline and diesel fuel and home heating oil for Minnesotans? No. They're moving that crude oil where? Not to Cushing, Oklahoma, where the WTI price, which is about $20 a barrel cheaper yet than the Brent price, the world price. They're moving that to St. James, Louisiana. What? So it can be exported out of here or priced at the Brent crude level. Just think of that, people. It's time we get on the phone to our governor and our state legislature and our congressional delegation. And what the heck is going on here? You letting old Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway stockholders that don't even pay a dividend, all they're doing is collecting more and more wealth and more without paying a dividend to anybody. They don't even need the money. They're just collecting wealth. And here we're using the railroad system that has special brakes and special powers, has for decades. We're letting them, instead of bringing that to lower the price of American energy costs, they're moving it down to southern Louisiana to export. It should make you, my listeners at Inform TV, infuriated. It certainly makes me mad. And the other question is, what about a pipeline? Why don't we put a pipeline in? If we've got $500 million to spend on a Viking stadium and we're going to bond our bonding, this is the bonding year in the legislature, with dirt cheap money, because the Fed is just printing. Why don't we help some of our pipeline companies, the Magellan pipeline here, that has a big tank farm, and most of those tanks are just standing empty. We could put a crude, Minnesota could have its own crude reserve in some of these empty tanks out here at Alexandria. Or we have the pipeline and tank system in Sauk Center that also has its own pipeline, and that goes back and forth, either delivering product down to Minneapolis or bringing refined product back to us here. Why aren't we seeing that our legislator, your House member, your senator, why aren't we talking about this when the federal government is failing to see that people in the upper Midwest here, citizens in Minnesota, why aren't we tapping that cheap energy? It just makes me furious, and it should make you furious as well. Yet at the same time, when we talk about pipelines and energy, I want to talk about modernization of Minnesota's government. One of the things that we look at, if you look at the major decisions and why we need to modernize our government, is the Vikings debate that's going on right now. And unfortunately, the way I'm set up at the present time, I have to run tapes ahead, but I'll soon have equipment in place, I believe, that I can have a short delivery period to you people getting Informed TV. And the point I bring up is the fact that I want you to concentrate on the major issues of Minnesota that time and time again are handled by a very few people. And what I'm looking at is the recount of Coleman, the recount procedures in our governor race, and what happens year in and year out in Minnesota, whether we have a Republican governor or a Democratic governor. They have become dictatorial in my view. And here's the point I make. What really happens when push comes to shove over the last decade or so in Minnesota? A handful of people in our legislature go in and cut the final deal. They cut the final deal with Pawlenty. They finally cut the final deal with Dayton when our government was shut down. It didn't take 201 people to run our government. It took a handful. Now, obviously, I don't want a handful. I don't want to enrich a dictatorship here in Minnesota, nor do you. But the reality is, Pawlenty brought it up years ago and he kind of forgot about it. I guess he liked being king of Minnesota, and Dayton's probably enjoys the same thing, being king of Minnesota. But the reality shows that, and the Viking debate shows, that we only need a unicameral legislature. When our government is talking about spending 200 and some million on modernizing our capital, working on the structure, they also want to put in a visitor center. People, it's time we do like Nebraska, have one body, just a Minnesota Senate. And the reality is, the Minnesota Vikings debate is showing that you get more than enough solid viewpoints. You get fair representation if we just have 67 people working there rather than 102. And the whole point about the fact that we struggle to find leaders, I'm telling you as a seasoned lobbyist, both in the state of Minnesota in my young years, as well as on the national scene, relating to sugar policy, the best way to get a nonpartisan government is to shrink the amount of players. And what happens when you shrink the number of players? The districts get wider. And when the districts get wider, what happens? It's harder and harder to get the court system, for example, this year that did redistricting, rather than our legislature, which our Constitution shows it should be, and back to the power of our governor. Suddenly, Governor Dayton, with his super lawyer of the Democratic Party, was able to get the court system in. So what do we have? About 5 judges telling us how our state is going to be realigned for election process. Clearly, one of the things when we talk about modernizing our government and see that our government serves all the people, not just the special interest groups that serve the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, the thing we have to look at, people, is to see that our government is wide enough, the districts are big enough, so that special interests can't isolate and empower one area. And what I'm getting at, clearly the Republicans got their head handed to them once again by the Democratic Party here in the state of Minnesota by not having sound lawyer in place. In fact, if we, the independents and Republicans, want some balance in our state government, we have to see that when the Republicans are meeting this year, that they figure out that they get a sound lawyer representing them like the Democrats have. And the other issue that when we look at government, we cannot get good people to run for office for a number of reasons. They don't want to go down there and deal with a bunch of people that are retirees that just want a title. The true people, the Glenn Taylor types that should be in our legislature, will not go down there when they have to deal with all these talking heads. People, we have to shrink our government. And the Vikings debate shows plain and simple what happens. Here we have Senator Rosen trying to put a Viking stadium deal together, one of the few people in the legislature that are willing to wear the pants or take the blame, so to speak. And yet at the same time, what happened? We found out that her co-author from the Democratic side, as at least at the time I'm talking here, he kind of backed out. And yet at the same time, the Republicans came forward, and I believe they probably had some Democrats with them, of saying, rather than spend and give all this money to the Vikings, let's give them the same tax breaks that we do to other businesses. So you can see the Senate already has 2 factions working. They have the Democratic side, and they have 2 viewpoints within the Republican side, clearly showing that 67 people can represent us better than 201 are representing us now. And you argue with me? Just look at this disastrous shutdown that we had last summer. That was because we lacked leadership. And if we're going to get our government here in the state of Minnesota to serve us all, we have to get a better grade of people, and we have to have less people fighting about the issues, and we have to see that we get back to what the Constitution talks about. 3 branches of government: the administrative branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And yet what happened? The judicial branch, because of the governor's actions and too much power, stepped in and trumped the legislature. That wouldn't have happened if we had had a smaller body with sounder minds. They would have made sure that we had a government where the legislature, whether they're Republican or Democrat, put the bills before the governor to sign and administer. And we need, in the state of Minnesota, if we're going to modernize government, we need our governor to start administering policy rather than dictating the legislative politics. And the only way we're going to get that if we go to one house. And I hope when you get, whether you're Democratic, Democrat, Republican, or Independence Party, you talk about that at your coming county conventions and congressional districts, because it's a must. We have to be governed by a legislator, not by dictating governors. The other thing that I want to look at in this legislative process is we want a clear choice on election day. We have developed now an independence party in this state that I welcome, because I think the Republican Party has become too extremist. The anti-abortion group, the anti-birth control, the anti-women's rights party, and the anti-tax group, as well as the Democratic Party, still focused on rust bucket unions that have not served the country well, or public employees union. And so having a third party may be a good thing, but the reality is, if we're going to have a primary system and 3 political parties in Minnesota, we have to change our primary system, that the 3 parties have their own primary, whether it's online or beforehand, and then we the people decide who we want the final 2 to be for governor, for the Senate, for our congressional offices. If we continue by not modernizing our government to see that we have 2 choices on the ballot, our dominant Democratic Party is going to basically control all the statewide offices and the congressional districts, because the Independence Party people is clearly going to come just a spoiler. And I firmly believe it will be not bringing the balance in, the nonpartisan balance the average citizen is wisely asking for. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in this state, in the modernization process, have to understand that the purpose of government, we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we at Inform TV, I will continue to show you unique things such as a crude oil price here in Minnesota that we as state people are not taking advantage of. Why? Because we got an old, out-of-touch state government, and we've got an old, out-of-touch congressional body in this state. And this election, we need to make some major changes. And if the Republicans want to do it with constitutional amendments, we need to see that we go to one body of legislatures to condense it down to a few good leaders, a few good men and women from all our parties, and see that they legislate, that they represent the people, and our governors quit dictating policy like they're doing at the present time. And our whole system here in Minnesota, we want to be Minnesota nice. No, the reality is we want to be Minnesota smart. And we want to see that our government starts delivering a modernized approach to government. To see that we're not just looking out for businesses, for farmers, and special interest labor unions. The people have to speak, and the only way the common citizen is going to get a voice is that we modernize government. Now, Inform TV, I'm soon going to start doing some interviews that bring people of interest in. I'm soon going to offer some time. The Republican Party, in fact, have already offered it to the Tea Party to bring in some views and take some of my time, whether it's on my new Tower channel here in the Alexandria Lakes area, or this program that I'm doing on cable outlets. But Inform TV, you'll find that we're going to inform you on interesting projects and topics like no one else can do, because we're a true research-based, numbers-based, and we're going to call the powers of, on the carpet, whether a Republican or Democrat, to see that the average citizens starts to get a true shake out of their government. Thanks for listening. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota.